Man, that's why I stress so much about black people creating their own wealth, operating their own businesses. In America, you have no business. You don't have anything unless you have wealth to back up those demands. Now, we all know that in Tulsa, Oklahoma, during Wall Street, blacks came out of slavery, and the colonizer was wondering how these slaves came up so fast to get their own businesses. We had our own bank, we had our own college, we had our own jobs. We weren't working for anybody. We created our own jobs using our own hands. After Abraham Lincoln dropped the Freedmen's Bureau Act. Now, what happened was we were doing so good. We was networking with other countries. We had an equivalent over $57 million. We operated 37 offices in 17 states. One of them is in Washington, D.C. And we were doing so good at that time. So, like I said, the colonizer was wondering how these slaves that came out of slavery was able to come up so fast. And they didn't like that these slaves were actually uh, occupying and gaining more money and countries to deal with them than they were. So they actually got upset and ended up bombing Tulsa. We all know that. So, hence to the 19th century, the 20th century, especially in the 19th century, 1920s, this is when African Americans actually started selling drugs. But it didn't really start popping off until maybe the late 60s, the 70s, whereas the crack epidemic and all of this stuff, they flooded the streets with nothing but drugs to keep us walking around. That was the plan, to keep us walking around looking like zombies, not wanting nothing, half out of our minds. But just like Tulsa, Oklahoma, they threw these drugs into our community and we overrode that. We made a situation out of something bad. And now black people selling drugs to other black people, yes, we know that was terrible. But we have to look at the other side of the picture. These African American black people were able to generate millions of dollars off of drugs that the government threw on our streets. I mean, the women were millionaires. There was a bunch of men that was millionaires. And then, so what they did was they created the war on drugs. The war on drugs wasn't about people taking drugs, people selling drugs. It wasn't even about the drugs itself. It was the simple fact of how these black people could take something that they threw on the streets and able to rise up and make millions of dollars out of it. Okay? That was the reason on the war on drugs. Okay? It had nothing to do with the drugs. It was because we rose up just like Tulsa, Oklahoma. When we had nothing. We made an opportunity out of nothing that the monkey wrenches they always try to throw at us, and we overcame it, making millions of dollars on these streets on drugs. Okay? They didn't like that fact. We started networking with other countries once again. And now they figuring out how. How are these black people able to do this coming from nothing? So they threw that monkey wrench in the game. Okay? Calling us super predators, the three strike rules, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, all of these people end up locking black people up in a mass incarceration. A bunch of black people were locked up, mainly drug dealers. Okay? And then they want to say to the media how bad drug dealers really were, that they were scum and super predators, but they never mention what these drug dealers did for the community. They opened houses. They opened activity centers for the children. They gave children school, college loans. They fed the community. They protected the community. It wasn't all about drugs. Yes, they felt bad because they sold drugs to their own people. So what they did was they ended up giving back to them in more ways than one. Okay? We couldn't get jobs. They wasn't letting us in our schools. And they threw crack out on the street. So how was we about to make money? Black people took the opportunity on the little that we had, and we made a big splash. We made a big opportunity raking in millions of dollars on a monkey wrench they threw on our streets. Okay? But they don't want to talk about the good that these drug dealers did. We supported a bunch of black people, whole bunch of communities we supported with that. So what was their thing to do? Was to lock these drug dealers up. If you lock these drug dealers up, who are the rest of the black people going to turn to? You can ask many of black people. They looked up to these drug dealers. Yes, they didn't want to accept that drugs was given to their family, but who else was looking out for them? So they kind of looked at these drug dealers as something special because they knew, yes, they were selling drugs in the community, but they was giving back. Okay? So just like Tulsa, Oklahoma was bombed, so was the monkey wrench of drug dealing they threw in our streets was bombed too, with a mass incarceration. It had nothing to do with drugs or war on drugs. It was just because black people were making millions of dollars helping our community and building. Okay? So I don't want to hear people saying, okay, drug dealers back then, they were terrible people. You don't know the truth. Look at your history, man. Look at your damn history, man. It's proven fact from after slavery, when we were given banks. Tulsa, Oklahoma, we had our own businesses. We didn't need to work for nobody. We still don't have to work for nobody. We can open up our own businesses. But after Tulsa, Oklahoma, after this so-called war on drugs, and they locked black people up, they have now created a foothold on our neck where it's hard for us to escape. Because after that, they started redlining and zoning. It's hard for us to get loans. If we get loans, we paying the highest insurance on cars, interest, everything. They're not hiring us for jobs. It's even harder for us to pay back student loans. Half of us can't pay it back. The other half don't graduate. So they done put a foothold and a big leverage on our neck where it's harder for us to escape. They're not going to repeat the same mistakes that they did in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and with the war so-called on drugs. Because they know that black people, our minds, we're so locked in, we can make an opportunity out of nothing. And they know that. So they're going to throw these monkey wrenches out there. They want us to walk around like zombies. It's a way of inflating us. And damn it, it's working. We don't have no wealth. Just because you see a couple of millionaires and a couple of billionaires walking around, we don't have no money. We not doing well. We not doing well at all. In 20 years, we going to be broke. If we don't start our own damn businesses, man. That's one of the ways of combating everything that they threw on us. We got to start making our own businesses and start spending our money with other races. We can't spend our money with other races. We need to keep that money in our pocket. And that's just a couple of examples how black people, we always overcome. And I know we can still overcome. But we got to recognize where the leverage that they're pulling from is. We got to recognize that the enemy is out here. And the enemy is not on our side. The enemy is out to destroy us. Okay? Peace.